This video is intended to provide general information regarding issues relating to the sales and use tax laws and cannabis tax law administered by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, which may affect cannabis businesses and will not serve as a basis for relief of liability under Revenue and Taxation Code sections 6596 and 55045. It is also not intended to provide advice or guidance related to other state and local statutes and regulations relating to the cannabis industry. Additionally, for the federal government's guidance regarding marijuana enforcement, refer to the U.S. Department of Justice website at www.justice.gov.
Hi, and welcome to Tax Help for the Cannabis Industry. My name is Sarah, and I'm a Business Taxes Specialist with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, or CDTFA. The CDTFA is responsible for administering many of the tax and fee programs in the state of California, including the new Cannabis Tax program. In this presentation, I'll be focusing on information for cannabis retailers. I would like to provide you with some basic information on the new Cannabis Excise Tax and make sure you're aware of your tax requirements. Please keep in mind that we're providing general information on the new cannabis taxes. You may have other requirements that are not covered by this video. If you have any questions about the information in this video, please submit them to CDTFA Cannabis Help at cdtfa.ca.gov. Your questions will be answered in a timely manner, and the questions you ask will help us in our outreach to cannabis businesses such as yourself. To begin with, let's go over the new Cannabis Tax Law. As you may know, voters approved Proposition 64 on November 8, 2016. Proposition 64, which was later amended by Senate Bill 94, legalized adult use of cannabis and established the Cannabis Tax Law. The Cannabis Tax Law provides for two new taxes on the sale of cannabis starting January 1, 2018, a cultivation tax and an excise tax. Cannabis distributors are responsible for collecting both of these taxes and paying them to the CDTFA. A cannabis retailer is a person who sells cannabis and/or cannabis products directly to a consumer. If you're a cannabis retailer, you have several requirements. First, you're required to register for a seller's permit. You can register for a seller's permit on the CDTFA website. Online registration is convenient, fast, and free. You are also required to report all your sales on your sales and use tax return and pay the sales tax due to the CDTFA. You may be reimbursed for the sales tax by your customers. The amount of tax is based on your gross receipts, and the tax rate is based on where the sale takes place, when the sale is over the counter, or when you deliver the item yourself. Additionally, you must report and pay use tax on taxable items that you purchased and used without paying tax. As a cannabis retailer, you are also required to collect the Cannabis Excise Tax from your customers. The Cannabis Excise Tax must be collected at the time of sale to your customers. You will then pay the excise tax to a cannabis distributor. I'll talk more about the Cannabis Excise Tax in a minute. Additionally, as a retailer, it is important that you keep accurate records of your business activities and make sure you obtain the appropriate business licenses. The Bureau of Cannabis Control, within the California Department of Consumer Affairs, is responsible for issuing commercial cannabis retailer licenses. However, there may be other local government licensing requirements, so you should make sure to contact your city and county government offices for information on local licenses. Let's talk about your requirements in a little more detail, starting with your sales tax responsibilities. As a retailer, you need to know if you're making a taxable sale. There is a specific exemption from sales and use tax for certain medicinal cannabis sales, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but generally, your sales are taxable. In general, sales tax applies to retail sales of tangible personal property in California. Tangible personal property is something you can touch and feel, and that includes cannabis, cannabis products, and cannabis-related accessories like rolling papers, pipes, or vape pens. In addition, some service and labor costs are taxable if they're a part of the sale of tangible personal property. The law presumes that the total amount of the gross receipts is subject to tax. Therefore, when calculating the amount of sales tax due, the cannabis excise tax must be included in your gross receipts. You also need to know that you're liable for sales tax even if you don't collect sales tax reimbursement. Additionally, you should make sure you apply the correct tax rate where the sale occurs. The tax rate is based on where the sale takes place when the sale is over the counter or when you deliver the item yourself. To find the correct tax rate, go to the CDTFA website. The sales and use tax rate is made up of different components: the state tax, voter-approved district taxes, and local taxes. The tax rate varies across the state. Our publication 44, District Taxes, covers this topic in more detail. You should make sure to take a look at it on our website for more information. As I mentioned before, certain sales of medicinal cannabis and cannabis products are exempt from sales and use tax. The exemption applies when your customer provides you with a valid medical marijuana identification card issued by the California Department of Public Health and a valid government identification card at the time of purchase. It is important to note that supplying a doctor's note or prescription is not sufficient to qualify for the exemption. Also, this exemption only applies to sales and use tax. There is no exemption from the cannabis excise tax. All consumers must pay the excise tax on their cannabis or cannabis product purchases. For information on the record-keeping requirements to support your exempt sales, see our tax guide for cannabis businesses on the CDTFA website. Now, let's talk about resale certificates. A resale certificate allows you to buy resale inventory without paying sales tax reimbursement to the seller. You must provide a completed resale certificate to your supplier at the time you're making your purchases or prior to making your purchases. We have a form on our website, Form CDTFA 230, which you can use as a general resale certificate. There are penalties for misusing resale certificates, so you should not use a resale certificate for purchasing items for personal use. This is an important topic. Please view our Understanding the Resale Certificate video for more information. So now that we've covered sales tax, let's talk about use tax. Use tax is a tax on items that you use or consume and purchase without paying tax. Use tax is the same rate as sales tax and generally applies to items you purchase from outside the state of California without the payment of California sales or use tax, or items you remove from your resale inventory for personal use. Please view our Paying Your Use Tax video for more information. So now that you know about sales and use tax, I'd like to mention a few key items you need to be aware of regarding filing your sales and use tax return. Filing your sales and use tax return is different than filing your state and federal income tax returns. You can file your return online on the CDTFA website. Make sure you know your return due date and if you need to make prepayments. If you do not file and pay on time, you may be liable for penalties and interest. And always keep copies of the returns you filed. If you need help, give us a call at 1-800-400-7115. So, in addition to the sales and use tax requirements we just discussed, as a cannabis retailer, beginning January 1st, 2018, you are responsible for collecting the cannabis excise tax from your customers. The cannabis excise tax is imposed upon purchasers and applies to the retail sale of all cannabis and cannabis products, such as edibles, lotions, oils, and waxes. The cannabis excise tax must be collected at the time of the retail sale at a rate of 15% of the average market price. You are not required to separately state the cannabis excise tax on the receipts that you provide to your customers, but you do need to make sure that your customer receipts or invoices states the phrase, "The cannabis excise taxes are included in the total amount of this invoice." Now, unlike sales and use tax, you do not directly report and pay the cannabis excise tax to the CDTFA. Instead, you will pay the excise tax to a cannabis distributor who is responsible for paying it to the CDTFA. As I mentioned, the cannabis excise tax is based on the average market price of the retail sale. The average market price is based on the type of transaction that occurred between the seller, whether that be a cultivator, manufacturer, or distributor, and you as the retailer, when you purchase that cannabis or cannabis product. The transaction can either be an arm's length transaction or a non-arm's length transaction. There are a couple of requirements for a transaction to be considered an arm's length transaction. First, the consideration or payment received by the seller must reflect the fair market value of the cannabis or cannabis products in the open market. And second, the transaction must be between two informed and willing parties. In an arm's length transaction, the average market price is the wholesale cost of the cannabis or cannabis products plus a markup. I'll talk more about this in a minute. In a non-arm's length transaction, the average market price is the retailer's gross receipts from the retail sale. An example of a non-arm's length transaction would be a business that is both a licensed distributor and a retailer of their cannabis products. So let's talk about the average market price in an arm's length transaction a little bit more. To determine the average market price in an arm's length transaction, you need to know two things: the wholesale cost of the cannabis or cannabis products and the markup rate. The wholesale cost is the amount you pay for the cannabis or cannabis products, including transportation charges and adding back in any discounts or trade allowances. As of January 1st, 2018, the markup rate is 60% for all cannabis and cannabis products. The CDTFA is required to determine the markup rate every 6 months. This rate is only used to compute the average market price of cannabis and cannabis products sold or transferred in an arm's length transaction. As a cannabis retailer, you may use any markup you would like to establish your retail selling price. Remember, in an arm's length transaction, the cannabis excise tax is based on the average market price, not your gross receipts. So, in an arm's length transaction, once the wholesale cost and markup rate are known, the excise tax due may be calculated. For example, let's say you purchase 5 pounds of cannabis flowers for $7,500 in an arm's length transaction. The distributor will apply the current markup rate, in this case 60%, to your wholesale cost to compute an average market price of $12,000 on this transaction. The 15% excise tax is applied to the average market price of $12,000 to compute the excise tax due of $1,800. The distributor is responsible for reporting and paying the $1,800 cannabis excise tax to the CDTFA on their cannabis tax return. As a cannabis retailer, it is very important that you keep adequate books and records, and you must make those records available upon request. These records may be hard copy or electronic format. Businesses in the cannabis industry must keep records of commercial cannabis activity for at least 7 years. It is important to understand the tax requirements for the cannabis industry. We have much more information available for you in our Tax Guide for Cannabis Businesses on the CDTFA website. Please be sure you take a look. If you have general questions for the CDTFA, you can always email us. If you have questions specific to the topics of this presentation, please email us at cdtfacannabishelp@cdtfa.ca.gov. We'll make sure to get back to you in a timely manner. Our Customer Service Center is also available to help with general questions and provide tax assistance Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., except state holidays. We also have videos available that address other aspects of the cannabis industry. I hope you found this information for cannabis retailers helpful. Thanks for watching.